Welcome back to my review of A Conscious Universe by Armando Calvo. As I record this, it's April, and I tend to make my videos in monthly 4-video batches, and there are only 3 chapters left, 5, 6, and 7, which means that by the end of the month, I will finally be done with this book forever. But you still get to endure it for weeks. Haha, sucks to be you. This chapter is Once Upon a Time, Chapter 5, Fairy Tales and God. Or, no. Sorry, that Once Upon a Time is supposed to be just a graphic, it seems. So ignore that. It starts with a scientific fairy tale. This is what scientists actually believe, in Armando Calvo's imagination.
Once upon a time, in the midst of darkness before anything existed, a small speck of heat energy began to grow in mass.
Yes, that's right. It turns out the infamous Chapter 8 was not the first time in this book that Armando's total failure on this topic appeared. Does this mean we're going to be covering the same ground again in this chapter? Was his God-inspired solution to his severe writer's block after Chapter 7 to just start repeating himself? I don't know, but take my hand and we'll find out together. If that's what it is, though, I'm not going to repeat myself too much. There's no point at all. Although when you think about it, there's also no point at all to reviewing this book in the first place. But,
Shaking with force, it started absorbing magnetic energy until it reached a point of complete pressure, and then boom!
Magnetic energy. That wasn't in Chapter 8, was it? Did the heat pressure thing change how it worked between chapters 5 and 8? Or did he just forget this was part of it? Or am I asking questions without answers again?
Exploding into many cells, the unleashing of gravitational force began drawing particles together, creating planets and stars. Perfectly designating each spherical mass, order began to navigate through the universe. The mass of heat energy enlarged into a star called the Sun.
So this heat energy mass, which was the pre-Big Bang universe, exploded into cells to make planets and stars, but also stayed in place and enlarged into our sun. What exactly does he think the sun is? Do I even want to know? Actually, I kinda do, and that fact kinda scares me.
Pulling each planet to its orbital space, each planet took its own place in the solar system.
So the planets were just floating around somewhere after being fully constructed from cells by this order that was swimming around. But then later, the pre-Big Bang heat pressure singularity magnetism... The thing turned into a sun, and then eventually the planets just kind of clicked into place around it. You know, science.
As particles continued coming together, a body of land and water formed from the gravitational push and pull, creating a planet for life.
What? But I thought the planets already existed at this point, and yet apparently Earth formed after all the other planets were in position. Does Earth not count as one of the planets? This way of thinking sounds troublingly similar to flat Earth geocentrism. Is that what we're dealing with here? I don't know. It's also vague, I can't tell.
As each cell navigated the mass structure, every cell began latching onto one another, evolving into living, conscious creatures.
Alright, I don't even care how screwed up his idea of evolution is. I just want to know what navigate the mass structure is supposed to mean. Does he mean something like moving around on the surface of the planet? Is the mass structure Earth? But would that even make sense? Because I thought that the cells went to create planets and stars. Or was that just some of them? I honestly don't know. I don't think there's any way to know from what's written here. I don't think he even knows what he means. Otherwise, there'd be some kind of consistency through this.
Each molecule, precisely following a consistent role and order, had evolved over time to form an incredibly complex and intelligent body of living organisms and human beings. This unintentional, unintelligent, unguided, purposeless, meaningless cause and effect from the pits of nothingness became what we now know as an existence of life. The creation of a conscious universe. The end!
And again, the book's title shows up. The Conscious Universe. The incredible cause that had an amazing plan. I understand even less now why he thinks this godless, conscious universe had a plan at all, but it's not like any of this would be any less consistent or more stupid otherwise, so I guess there's no point thinking about it. So, do you remember how way back in Chapter 8 I said nothing in this book would be worse than the Big Bang section there, and that it'd be all uphill from there? Yeah, I lied. I knew about this part already back then. Sorry, it was just funnier this way. This part's worse. It's basically the same thing as that, but condensed and with extra features. So it is worse. I don't understand how this even happened. You know, normally his strategy is just to look up a live science article about whatever topic he's trying to talk about and plagiarize a bunch of stuff from it. And really, if he had any sense at all, he would have stuck with that strategy for this part, because although plagiarism is far from ideal, at least he might have stood a chance at ending up with something that isn't a Mad Libs. Oh, and speaking of Mad Libs, I made this into one. It was begging for it, I had to do it. I'm not going to upload it anywhere, just print it off the screen if you want to do it. Enjoy!
What an amazing story that was. It literally blows my mind. In fact, my brain just had a big bang.
No, whatever went wrong with your brain happened a lot longer ago than that.
What can we learn from this?
About what? Science? Absolutely nothing. I would say we've learned something about you, but we already knew you were like this, so I guess we can learn nothing about anything. Sometimes through this series, I really do wonder why I bother, and this is one of those times.
We learned that the inconsistencies of this philosophy self-destruct and—
No, I'm not even reading the rest of that. Okay, I'm not in the mood to keep repeating the obvious over and over again. I have been before, maybe later I will be again, because I do find it fun sometimes, but this time, no, not gonna happen. I can already tell that finishing this book review is going to be exhausting, and I'm sure that at this point even the audience feels that way, despite all of them spending far less time engaging with this than I have. So I think I'll be forgiven for just telling you no in this case. Try to get a clue before you start assembling a rebuttal to something next time, man. How are you supposed to do a good job rebutting something when you didn't bother to find out anything about what it is? It's like if you started rebutting some political position, like say communism, and you said, so communism is the position that it's better to use real vanilla than fake vanilla in baking. I don't even know what you call this kind of wrongness. The word wrong is just not strong enough, no matter how many intensifiers I put in front of it. The next section is Science Submits to God.
Unlike a fairy tale, God does not fit the descriptive context of what a fairy tale consists of.
I'm not sure, but I think that random mishmash of words is supposed to mean that God isn't a fairy tale. And yeah, I know. He's a character. Characters in tales are not tales themselves. What a revelation.
When we talk about God, we are not seeking for an imaginary hope.
Uh-huh. Well, here he mentions his previous book, God Is, pointing out that the arguments that follow were already covered in that book. And then he proceeds to, well, make arguments he already made in God Is. Cosmological evidence and teleological evidence. That is, he thinks God had to make the universe and design it too. Why? I don't know. But he said he's not seeking for an imaginary hope, so that can't have anything to do with it. Does anyone actually care if I cover generic arguments like these yet again? No? Yeah, I thought not. You don't care, and neither do I. Let's just keep it moving. Having made these tired arguments all over again, he then says that secular scientists have tried to avoid the need for a god by creating theories like the multiverse.
There is no plausible evidence for this theory. Rather, it's based on a miraculous guess to why this universe is so specified as to make life possible. They are assuming that we were pulled from a jar 1 out of 9,999.999999, with the number being greater than that, of course.
Yeah, I'd hope so. For your sake. 1 out of 10,000 ain't bad odds at all for this kind of thing. What made you think those were especially bad odds? Bad enough to illustrate this point? Do you think the 0.999999 makes that number significantly larger? That's basically 1. And why would a jar of discrete items like marbles or whatever contain 0.999999 of an item? What does that even mean? 0.999999 of a marble is still a marble, isn't it? Do you not know what a decimal is? I find that easy to believe and yet still somehow shocking.
They make it literally impossible for there to be any reason that science doesn't prove God.
Literally impossible. I thought it was 1 in 10,000 or something. Actually, no, never mind. You said it was greater than that, of course. So I guess it could be 1 in any number greater than 10,000, of which there are infinity. So it was completely pointless to specify 1 in 10,000. Why'd you bother then? But still, pick any number you want. 1 in that number is not literally impossible.
Here's what James Tour, an American chemistry professor who studies material science and nanoengineering/nanotechnology, said.
That's right. Here again, we have another one of those rare actual quotations that says who said the thing, and then it's in quotation marks. Granted, he doesn't say where it actually comes from because, Well, nobody on the internet seems to say where it actually comes from, and I'm pretty sure Armando just saw this image on Facebook or something and then used that. It doesn't really matter though, because it's the kind of thing I can easily see James Tour saying. He's a synthetic chemist and messianic Jew with lots of negative opinions about origin of life research, and its relationship to the God question. The quote says that science shows God because, quote, I build molecules for a living. I cannot begin to tell you how difficult that job is. So he's comparing his job of synthesizing molecules in the lab, which implies a particular desired outcome and the need to figure out steps yourself, to chemistry just happening in the universe. That's remarkably dumb, because of course chemistry in nature does not operate on predefined goals like he presumably does most of the time, and it has no need to engage in some kind of difficult reverse engineering figuring out process to develop some way to succeed at its goal. It's a very silly apples to oranges comparison from a very motivated reasoner. I don't find a guy has an opinion that agrees with mine to be a good argument at the best of times, because I can find you a smart guy who agrees with me too. It means nothing, and I don't get why people think I should be convinced by it ever, but it's extra unconvincing here.
When we talk about the existence of God, we are not comparing him with a make-believe character such as Santa Claus or Pinocchio. We are talking about the cause of the universe.
Yeah? And kids who talk about Santa are talking about the cause of the presents in the stocking. What's your point? This isn't about what question you're addressing, this is about how you're approaching it.
Characters made by man for the purpose of entertainment or storytelling serve a purpose of placing attention onto a specific topic or event. Santa Claus is a character used for the Christmas holiday and serves the purpose of mysterious magic and gifts for the good boys and girls.
Yes, exactly, which is why I'm having a hard time seeing the difference so far.
He is portrayed as a jolly older man who flies around on a sled guided by reindeer delivering gifts to every home in the world. Children would leave out cookies and milk, hoping to satisfy the jolly man's belly for his hard work.
Thank you for explaining to me what Santa is. That was entirely unnecessary to make your point, as we're about to see, but I guess that could be useful for anyone who's unfamiliar.
But notice how this is used in a fashion to capture the attention of the younger generation. This doesn't explain reality, it only serves as an imaginary hope.
Yeah. You're saying all this like it's supposed to make me not see God as similar to Santa. So shouldn't you be talking about their differences, not their similarities? He does the same kind of thing for the Tooth Fairy.
It allows children to get something out of losing a tooth, and in return receiving money as a reward. But this also lacks explanation for reality. It only describes a make-believe character who serves to reward children for their baby teeth. It doesn't tell us anything about the real world.
Yes, they do. They tell us there's a fat guy in a red suit who rides around on a sleigh towed by flying reindeer, who delivers presents to all the good boys and girls every year, and likes milk and cookies and comes down chimneys, and that there's a tooth fairy who really enjoys collecting teeth and will give you some amount of whatever your national currency happens to be if you lose one. These are things they tell us about the real world. They're not true things, but that's not the point.
Let alone pay us enough for our teeth.
That last part's an attempt at a joke, but other than that, again, you're supposed to be convincing me these don't sound like God. But the more you talk, the more they sound like God, especially Santa. When the parents of kids convince them that Santa is real or the Tooth Fairy's real, the kids believe they're real, exactly the same way that you believe God is real. And they have evidence, too. The presents under the tree, the money under the pillow. Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy explain these features of reality. Whether they're actually real really isn't the point. And the relative importance of the claims made about reality in each of these stories also is not the point. In this way, God belief and Santa belief are completely similar. And there are more similarities, of course. Santa is this supernatural explanation for some phenomenon that we don't understand. Presents that just appear in the morning, which in actual fact is far more easily explained naturally, but the kids leap to conclusions based on this objectively very poor evidence, and they're socially reinforced in leaping to that conclusion by their parents and their society, as well as all the books and songs and TV shows about Santa. Also, Santa's a fatherly figure who performs supernatural miracles. His believers try to please him by participating in rituals, like the cookies in the milk. People try to transmit messages to his remote, unreachable home. Those letters kids write asking for presents, just like the prayers people make asking for help. He's this seemingly all-knowing, distant judge of people's behavior, and he rewards those who please him, who act in accordance with his rules. And he does not seem like a very realistic explanation for reality, and serves only as an imaginary hope. Some people think the Santa Claus comparisons with God are a little bit tired out, but you couldn't make a better analogy for God belief if you tried. So whatever you were trying to achieve with this part, you failed. In describing Santa Claus, you've basically described God.
God is not a character used like a fairy tale character is used.
I deeply disagree.
God is not a plug-in for the gaps in our knowledge.
Yes, he is. That's all he is. That's basically what that James Tour quote was. Making molecules is hard. Therefore God. That's what your whole book is. Brains do stuff. Therefore God. Humans have feelings. Therefore God. There's stuff in the universe. Therefore God. Your entire book is a heap of God of the Gaps arguments. God is a placeholder for real knowledge that you don't care enough to acquire. It's a tool for the lazy. I shouldn't say that's all he is, though. He's one other thing, too, which is a tool to enforce your preferred human behaviors. People will say, God wants this, or God wants that, and half the time they'll disagree with each other, and they'll say, so you better act the way I say God wants you to, because otherwise you're going to go to hell and not heaven. And similarly, parents will tell their kids, hey, smarten up or you're not getting any presents at Christmas. Do what I tell you or you're just going to get a lump of coal. And in that way, God is a character used exactly the same way as your example of a fairy tale character, Santa Claus, is used. Although, of course, the God example is a little more extreme, but that's a difference of degree, not of kind. Seriously, you could not have picked a worse example to try to illustrate how different these things are.
Instead, God is the explanation of why anything exists at all.
Yeah, I know. Any gap you see, you just plug God in. And there you go, you've got an explanation for why anything at all exists. No need to lift a finger trying to figure out a real answer. You can just mold your God silly putty to fit into any hole. And you just ignore the fact that maybe there are solid blocks that are actually the correct shape for that hole.
God is the explanation of why anything exists at all, let alone our ability to think and create wonderful imaginations. God is described as a being or cause of everything we had observed through the existence of the entire known universe and everything in it.
Right, so we don't use God to just plug into the gaps in our knowledge. We just describe him as filling in all the gaps in our knowledge, that's all. Ridiculous.
A fairy tale is a product of an imaginary concept with lacking evidence of its validity. But God checks every box for the truth of the existence of the universe.
So now what? Are we going to do a pages-long comparison of the relative believability of Santa and the Tooth Fairy and God? No, but that's what you did with the alien demons and Bigfoots, and that was pretty much the same thing. You know what? I don't think you ran out of ideas after Chapter 7. I think you ran out of ideas before Chapter 5. Although if I'm being really honest, I actually think you ran out about 3 pages into God Is, and never recovered. Anyway, the next section is on the historical reliability of Jesus, curse it! Yes, Jesus, curse it! C-H-R-S-I-T. He refers to Jesus this way 4 times in the next 2 pages. His first bit of evidence of the Bible's reliability is a bunch of stuff he stole from this site. And this stolen material goes on from page 71 to page 73. I think the only plagiarism here that's not from Be Thinking is a description of Tacitus that he stole from Encyclopedia Britannica. He kinda half-heartedly tried to change some of the words around here and there to hide his plagiarism, but of course it's nowhere near enough to pass even the worst plagiarism check. It's so much plagiarism, I don't even know how to show it on screen. But luckily, I have my little helper monkey and wife, Ezet Original, doing a lot of the plagiarism comparison slides for me, so she can suffer through trying to figure that out. Maybe you should go subscribe to her. She does similar stuff to what I do. For some reason, Armando tries to reduce the plagiarism-iness of all this by referencing his Be Thinking source in a little resources used note at the end of the chapter on page 78. But of course that in no way makes it not plagiarism somehow to copy multiple pages wholesale from a website without so much as an indication that it's quoted from somewhere else. Even less so when the URL given in that resources note doesn't even work, as in this case. Hell, as in most cases in this book. I don't know what's hard about Control-C, Control-V-ing a URL, but it seems like it's really, really hard for this author, since he almost never does it, and instead just seems to manually write out some random thing that's vaguely like the actual URL. Not even in its appearance or anything, just in its general meaning in human language. After all that plagiarism, he plagiarizes for multiple more pages, this time from blackrock.org, which is not that big investment company's website. It's the blog of some church in Connecticut. He also tries to list this as a resource used at the end of the chapter, and again, the URL is completely, totally wrong. And again, he just wrote out something that's vaguely similar in meaning. I don't know if he thinks his browser is some sort of an AI, like he can just make up something vaguely similar to the URL he wants and it'll still work. Like the browser will just understand what he's trying to tell it. That may actually be a thing that browsers do eventually, and I definitely don't look forward to that day because I foresee ending up on the wrong page a lot. But some people seem to love that kind of stuff. I don't know why.
With all of this valid information, we clearly see that the assumption of God being an imaginary hope, or that the history of Jesus was made up, is a completely nonsensical and foolish presupposition.
Oh, yeah, right, the information. Yeah, I just realized that I forgot to say what any of the arguments actually were in all that plagiarized material. I just kind of said it was plagiarized and forgot to say what the point was. But it's not like I'm going to address it anyway, is it? I'm here to respond to Armando, not some site called Be Thinking or some random Connecticut church. So you know what? If you care, for some unfathomable reason, go read this stuff yourself. Either it's linked in the description, or I was a dumbass and forgot. I can't wait to find out which it is. I'm on the edge of my seat. Regardless, if you spend much time with this kind of topic at all, it's unlikely that there's anything there you haven't heard before. Maybe not the specifics, but certainly the general type of stuff. Either way, it's nothing impressive. You're not going to come out of it a Christian. Next up is Miraculous Experience. And Armando says, as usual, that the existence of the universe and people having thoughts and feelings are miraculous things, and then ridicules atheists for not thinking these things were caused by someone.
That's just loony. You jump around when a person scores a full court shot on the basketball court. You run around ecstatically when someone wins the lottery, a 1 out of 1 billion chance. You call those things miracles, but when it comes to the universe, you just simplify it as chance.
No, I don't call either of those things miracles. Why would I? Why would you? Why would anyone? Tons of people play basketball. Lots of them are good at it. An impressive shot is basically inevitable. I'm not surprised that it happens. I would be surprised if it didn't. Maybe it's surprising that it happened this time in particular, but that's not the point. There's no need to invoke some supernatural cause. And as for the lottery, somebody always wins eventually. Name a lottery that just has not been won ever, period. There may be one out there, but it's either pretty new or fraudulent. If you come up to me and say, "Someone won the lottery, did you hear?" I'm gonna wonder why you're telling me this. It's so common that it's not even worth mentioning. But if you told me in advance who would win, and then that person won, at first I'd have some very probing questions for you to figure out if there was something going on here that made it not such a chance thing after all. But if I decided that it was a legitimate guess, sure, I'd be impressed. But just being impressed by something you did doesn't mean I'll call it a miracle. Many people make lottery predictions. Odds are one of them's been right sometime. Impressive or improbable are not the same as miraculous. Improbable things happen all the time. Now, with the universe, there's also no need to invoke miracles. There's a way the universe is, and the particular state that it's in is unlikely because there are so many possible states. But if there's a universe at all, it has to be in some state. Now, the fact that the universe just is a way is not impressive. But if it had been predicted in advance that it would be exactly this way with our galaxy and our sun and planets and life forms and the exact configurations of molecules and so on, that would be incredibly impressive, assuming there wasn't some quirk of physics that would narrow the field of possibilities significantly and make it much less impressive of a prediction. Kind of like how, for example, amino acids are so easily and commonly formed in nature just by the nature of atoms. There are many quirks like this that narrow the field, and I can almost promise you that we don't know all of them yet. What science has discovered so far is that chance doesn't play as big a role in things as people like to think. To the extent that chance does play a role, roll in most processes. It's in the way that a loaded die might still give you one of the other numbers, but the odds still favor a certain kind of outcome. In that case, one of the numbers being much more common than the others. But all of that we're just ignoring, really, and just saying, for the sake of argument, sure, it's chance. But again, the impressiveness of this is based on there being a prediction first. So where's the prediction? Nowhere. Nobody said in advance, I think the universe will end up this way, and then it did. There's a big difference between flipping a coin 1,000 times and predicting the outcome of 1,000 coin flips. What you seem to expect me to think is miraculous is just that there is some way stuff is. It seems like you like the way it is, you think the way it is important because it's important to you, and so you think the whole thing must have been set up to meet the expectations that you eventually would have. I'm sorry, but no. You're not the center of everything. To act like you were the end goal of the universe is staggeringly arrogant. If you won the lottery and that made you very excited, that wouldn't mean the game was rigged in your favor.
I want to keep things serious, but if you could see my face right now whilst writing this book, you would understand what I'm feeling right now.
You put an emoticon in your book. Well, luckily, you can see my face right now whilst recording this video, so you can understand what I'm feeling right now. Look, says it all, don't it? On page 77, he just keeps on repeating the same old argument that we've seen endlessly throughout this book and the last one. Can't get a universe from nothing. That needs God. God created the universe. Gotta have God. God, God, God. Then he reiterates that God definitely is not a fairy tale, and fairy tales aren't true like God is, and Jesus was the real deal, and there's no point. There's nothing new left here. Armando has such a single-track mind that he just cannot help himself coming back to the same points over and over and over. There's just no point. And at this point in the series, I'm pretty sure my frustration is showing through fairly clearly. I am tired of this book. So tired of it. I can hardly stand to look at it anymore. It, triggers my gag reflex. Going into this project, I actually kind of thought, naively, that after the last time, Armando might have learned at least a couple of lessons and put some sort of effort into making something better. But instead, he came out with a book so densely packed with stupidity and plagiarism that it takes a 10-part series just to address it. And you can probably tell I'm barely even addressing it in any real detail. I'm certainly not addressing every single point he makes. I'm not going for the $50 gift card here. I focus on the occasional point, and for the rest I just get a quick laugh out of it and move on. But still, it's exhausting. Ah well, though. It's fine. There's not that much left. Just 2 chapters left after this one. Now, I'm sure that this video will probably end up a little bit shorter than most of them, and I'm sorry about that, but it doesn't make sense to me to try to force this video to be 40 minutes long, and the thought of combining it with another chapter right now makes me want to retch. So this is just what it is. Okay, I've been aiming for videos a little bit on the longer side for quite a while now, and I think I've done a lot that were quite long, but this one, we're just gonna have to be happy with whatever length it is. Have mercy on me. Thank you. You're very kind. So Armando ends the chapter by listing all the stuff he's already spent the whole chapter saying, and then the chapter just ends with the little list of resources. One of them is jns.org, and I didn't find anything plagiarized from there. That's not to say he didn't use this source somewhere, but if he did, I don't know what he used it for. I guess it's possible that he wrote a whole section based on it, but then deleted it because it didn't meet his high standards. Ha 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 ha. Is that it? Yeah, that's it for this one. Okay. Okay, that's a relief. Thanks for watching. The fact that you've been watching is the reason I keep torturing myself with this. My only consolation is that it also tortures you. Shared pain is still the same amount of pain, except you drag someone else into it. And that feels really good when it's their fault in the first place. I'm just kidding, of course. No, really, thank you for watching. If you would, before you go, please do give the video a like and click subscribe if you haven't. And if you like the channel, please do consider supporting. Even a small amount per video or per month helps a huge amount. And enormous thanks to every one of my supporters who's already made that choice. If you want early access, email list.logicked.com, and I'll see you next time.